Modi Magasan. Good morning, everyone. In the best practices of conferences in Georgia, maybe in the South Caucasus, where our kind of introductory remarks are starting a little bit late, but our panel actually starts on time, sharp. So it's a pleasure to see you again in the second day of CRRC 9th annual CRRC conference. I'm very much looking forward to today's panels. Today we don't have panel sessions. We have 2 sessions, but they're equally important and interesting as yesterday's sessions. So, and we'll be based in this room for the whole time period. So we'll have essentially 2 sessions. The first session, which will start just right after this introductory note, is New Economic Geographies of the South Caucasus. The next session after that, we'll have a lunch break, traditional lunch break, followed by another session on intercommunal relations in the South Caucasus, which will be moderated by Dustin Gilbreth. And following that, will be a short 15-minute break, and we'll have about an hour and a half methods workshop, which personally I'm very much looking forward to. The workshop will be about photo voice in the South Caucasus, and you can see the beautiful photo exhibition here. So these all things are tied together. So without, and after that, of course, we'll have short closing remarks as well. So without much further ado, let me welcome our first panel, the participants of our first panel. Just a quick housekeeping before we start. Each presenter has 15 minutes sharp to present their work. Follow that. So we will collect all the questions from the audience after all presentations, and we'll have about 15-minute Q&A session. That will be the structure. I will remind the participants for 5 minutes and 0 minutes. So please keep in mind time frame. So our first group of presenters are, and our first presentation is affordable housing and access to higher education, where and how do students from the regions live in Tbilisi, which will be presented by Professor Rati Shubladze and Mr. Zakaria Tavberidze, both representing Georgian Institute of Public Affairs, GIPA. And gentlemen, the floor is yours. We're very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Dato. So let me share the screen. Thank you, Dato. Thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to present our ongoing study on this conference. And me and Zako, we are very glad that we have this opportunity to return to CRRC, because we started our academic and research career here around 10 years ago, almost. Our study relates to the topic of affordable housing among Georgian students who come to Tbilisi from other regions of Georgia, and we were interested in what type of challenges they encounter when moving to Tbilisi, what are the conditions and areas they are living in, what type of challenges they face, and how inadequate housing of students affect their academic performance, their employment, health, and overall psychosocial well-being. Briefly about the methods. So we tried to combine method triangulation approach. We had a little survey, a little online survey, where we collected about 400 completed cases. We also had 6 expert interviews that were used for preparatory works, for preparing the study instruments. We had 5 semi-structured interviews with students living in students' dormitories and or renting housing in Tbilisi. Also, we conducted 4 focus group discussions with such students. So, as I mentioned, our study is still ongoing. We need to conduct additional 5 semi-structured interviews with students following the study and following the initial insights, what we got from our data. Being student in Tbilisi, so many students noted that it's not their choice, but it's only way of pursuing higher education in Georgia, as most developed and most accessible higher education institutions are concentrated in Tbilisi. However, often their dreams are not fulfilled. Many face problems when moving from their hometowns, their villages to Tbilisi. And usually this is associated with lack of social capital, difficulties in resocialization in Tbilisi. They are getting problems when searching for the affordable housing and other related problems. And also financial constraints, both tuition fees and living expenses, they all cumulatively had negative impact on students' development. And so we tried to explore in details how those changes are influencing their lives. Following the COVID-19 outbreak and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the housing prices in Tbilisi skyrocketed, and that directly and indirectly had a negative impact on students. And the problems in searching for housing became even more problematic. Students from low-income families, those without strong social capital networks in Tbilisi, usually male students, they find it extremely hard to find the housing, and one of the widespread means of searching for the housing is internet or relatives or friends, and all those, so except internet, all those primary sources for searching for housing, they are interconnected to the social capital and the social networks, which are weak and underdeveloped for young students who just came to capital city without knowing many there. Speaking about the housing prices, so not only our study and it's not only perceptions, but the official data backs these observations that many find it extremely difficult and extremely hard to find affordable housing. So basically, compared to 2019, the prices of rent nearly doubled compared to pre-COVID-19 conditions, and students are forced to pay high prices if they are lucky enough to find affordable or any type of housing. A majority of students report that they are renting the housing, and just 2% of our surveyed respondents noted that they live in dormitories. And even living in dormitories, we will see it later, even living in dormitories is not an option. Students usually live or share their space either with relatives or their friends, and usually they don't live separately, and it's a bit luxury for them to live in their own separate space. The average number of people, so we asked our participants how many people they live with, and the average number of people students live is around it is 3 person, and the living space, I guess I understand that it's very vague. projection, but it's around 50 square meters, the average size of the housing they live in. So students live in places which are distant and far away from their higher education institutions. So when we asked how many minutes does it take to using public transportation to go from your place to the university, it was around 50 minutes. And the places are distant and far away for them. The housing conditions. So in the survey, housing conditions were evaluated a bit moderately, a bit satisfactory. But when we asked about, so it's relative. So when 33% is not satisfied with the bathrooms and toilets, it's not a good story and not a good news, I guess. But relatively, they got more or less satisfactory evaluation. But in the interviews, during the interviews, they were openly giving specific examples, and usually they were giving examples of their friends, and this was also another finding that they are a bit shy speaking about their own problems, and they were using examples of their friends when describing the hard conditions. And when we asked about the appliances and the current conditions in their households, I would like to focus your attention on the three variables. So 34% said that they have learning space. 45% said that they have a private room, and 57%, only 57% said that they had personal computer. And so I also lacked personal computer when I was in my bachelor studies, but it was 15 years ago. And since I guess the world has evolved, and now without personal computer, it's pretty hard to learn adequately. And to illustrate the pictures from one of the dormitory, so the quote is also provided here that describes this dormitory. Now this person lives in another dormitory that has better conditions, but this was the first image he encountered when he came from his hometown, and he saw this and he was very depressed, and he said he did not want to learn anymore. He was giving this, and he wanted to go back to his hometown. So I won't say that this is a widespread picture, but this is one of the illustrative picture what the housings might look like. Now I give floor to my colleague, Zakro.
Thank you, Rati. Okay. Another topic we want to discuss is related to students' employment and their social economic conditions. As you see from the chart, more than 30% of students reported that they do not have money for the basic necessities. And in this situation, it's obvious that they are struggling and they want to find a job. And most of them reported that they want to cover, they want this employment to cover for their, to cover for their basic expenses, and they could not be a student without employment. But when it comes to students' employment, they face two kinds of challenges. The first problem is that there are scarcity of jobs in general. And the second problem is that even if they are lucky and they find a job, then they have another problem that they need to maintain it and they need to keep it and somehow balance with studies. And it is really challenging for them. Another problem is that they don't have this job satisfaction and the quality of jobs is really low for them. They were complaining that labor is very intense, and they neither the employer nor the university takes into consideration the situation, and they do not have these flexible schedules. As the result, they are so tired that sometimes they don't go to the universities, or when they go, they are so tired that they might get literally sick during the lectures. And they reported that they might come to the university from night shift, and they lack sleep, and it's a really big problem for them. And when we speak about how they are struggling, we need to take into consideration that they are new into the city and they really lack social capital and social safety net. 38% of them reported that they do not have anybody to ask for $100 in the case of need, and 28% said that they don't have a place to stay overnight in the case of need. So they really need really need live in precarious conditions, and they need to have some kind of economic independence to have this sense of stability. But the problem is that even if they work full time, they rarely can cover their living expenses, and somehow they have this sense of uneasiness because they depend on their parents, and they still need support from their parents. And the quote from one of the respondents is very emotional and it's sad personally for me, because he was saying that he thinks that he's a parasite just because his mother emigrated to cover his living expenses, and the person who calls himself a parasite really works full time from the first year of his study. So he's really a hardworking person, it seemed from the interview, but still self-esteem and self-esteem is really low. So it's a big problem, and all these problems are aggregated into the mental health issues and challenges related to psychological problems. Students often feel lonely, and they also complain that they are almost always anxious that they might lose their place where they live. And there was also emotional quotes from our respondents. They were saying that people think that students' life is an easy life, and in reality, we are struggling every day. And even before the interview, I was crying. So one of the respondents were saying, and they were saying that they really struggled mentally. But the problem is that, the problem is that when they have these economic problems, they at least can have this expectation that the family will support them, but they cannot say the same about the mental health issues because I don't know what it's doing.
Something.
Okay.
Fast.
Okay, did this. About the mental health problems, they do not have this expectation, this family support them, because as they said, their parents do not perceive their problems as really real. Mental health issues is not considered to be real. And this is why maybe on the question related to the mental health, they were so enthusiastic to answer, and they were saying that it's so good that you asked this question to me, and they wanted to express themselves, and it indicates how frustrated they were. And it obviously leads to the lack of motivation, and most of us who had some kind of experience in maybe mental issues and mental challenges, we know that it's very difficult to focus and study at that time, and they have lack of motivation. Now I will briefly summarize. The first takeaway is that regional students' educational attainments are influenced by the factors beyond the classroom or university setting. It is not the rocket science. Obviously, literature review indicates to this direction, but in Georgia context, it's relatively rare to discuss students' educational achievements in this context. Students often lack personal space for intellectual development, hindering their ability to study and explore academic interests. And it reminds me of Virginia Woolf's work about room of one's own. Our students do not have this room. And obviously, this precarious way of living leads to mental health issues, which we discussed. And overall, I want to summarize that regional students face a network of interconnected and multi-layered problems, which make them a vulnerable group. And I think that we need to study and treat them as such. That's all, I think.
That is actually, thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. And I think it's a super timely study because, well, you correctly mentioned about the precarious situation of students in Georgia. And I think this is something like many people just do not pay enough attention to. Our next presentation will be about a slightly different topic. but still tied to the economic geographies in a broader sense. And the title of the presentation will be Localizing Smart Cities in the Post-Soviet Context, the case of Azerbaijan. And this will be presented by Professor Anar Valiyev from Ada University, Baku, Azerbaijan. And the co-author is Fidan Namazova, who unfortunately could not join the presentation, but I think it will be super interesting to listen to the presentation. Professor Valiyev, the floor is yours. We are looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. First of all, thank you very much for just hosting me at your conference. I really appreciate it. Welcome to you all from Baku, from Ada University. My name is Anar Valiyev. I'm Associate Professor of Public Affairs at Ada University, and area of my expertise is urban studies and urban planning and development. So first of all, in order to, before going for the explaining about my research, I just wanted to explain you why there was a question about the smart cities. What is so catchy about this topic, and why I decided to just work on this topic is that right after the Second Karabakh War, Azerbaijan got into the situation when it needed to reconstruct the huge territories, demining, reconstruction, building new cities, completely repopulating the whole group of the people, up to the 600,000 people, relocate them back to territories of Karabakh. And the government began to search for the certain type of the policy options, because this type of the relocation never happened in neither in the Soviet Union or in Europe for the last couple of decades. So Baku needed to find certain type of the solution or policy option, what to do that. So one of the options that Azerbaijan began to look at is that issue of the smart cities. Smart cities, smart villages, became very catchy term. Everybody began to use this kind of terminology, and even President back in February 2021, when he came to Karabakh, he simply said that we will reconstruct all the territories and bring people to the new smart villages and new smart cities. But the biggest challenge over here was what is the smart cities? What is the smart villages? And can Baku and can Azerbaijan just manage to implement such kind of the policy in this kind of reconstructed areas? So what is that the first challenge that Azerbaijan began to just face is that issue of the conceptualization. What is a smart city? What is a smart village? Because each ministry, each agency of Azerbaijan began to understand the smart city or smart village concept completely different. Some of them just look at it from the technological perspective. Some others looked at it from effectiveness perspective. Some about efficiency. Most of them agency ignored the citizen participation aspect of the smart cities. So my kind of the approach to this study and to article that I'm writing right now is to look at the preparedness of Azerbaijan for the smart city, and whether Azerbaijan properly understand the smart city and smart village concept properly. So what we did is that with my colleagues, we just look at most of the content analysis of the documentations that Azerbaijan produced for that period of time on the understanding of what's a smart city and smart village. We interviewed dozens of the people from the governmental agencies to look at their perceptions of what a smart city, smart villages. Then we had around 100 interviews, 100 IDPs, and we have around 20 focus groups. In each focus group, there was 5 people. When we looked at, asked them issues on the community building plus smart city and smart villages. And finally, we look at the statistical data of Baku, of Azerbaijan, on specifically how well Azerbaijan is prepared for the smart city and smart village concept. So for the sake of our studies, we looked at the a smart city from perspective of Ruhan, from their articles in 2018. What does it means? Smart city, it means more effective data-driven decision making, safer communities, increased digital equity, improved transportation, efficient public utilities, and so on and so forth. So if you look at Azerbaijan situation in urban affairs, you can just see that the situation is a little bit different from the cities where from the countries where the smart city concept were implemented. Well, first of all, the urban primacy index in Azerbaijan is around 9. What does it mean urban primacy index? Is that the Baku population of Baku is around between 3 to 4 million, while the second biggest city, Sumgait and Ganja, is something around 350,000. So the difference between the first city and second city is almost 10 times. Most of the population of the countries, I mean, more than 40% is concentrated on the Baku and Absheron Peninsula. Urban populations is around 56%. And the biggest challenge is that we have numerous cities that doesn't go beyond of 100,000 population, and the growth of the cities has stopped in the last couple of years. The biggest challenge for Azerbaijani government in implementing this type of the concept was that misunderstanding of what the smart city. When we just interviewed the several ministries, we understood that most of the ministries misunderstand the concept of the smart city. So, for example, for Ministry of Transport and Communication, the smart city was mostly about technology. For Ministry of Transport, it's more about the traffic management system. For Ministry of Health, it was something related to the post-pandemic management of the healthcare system. For Ministry of Education, it was an online education. So and even for the governmental agencies, e-governance was considered as a smart solution or smart city development, although it was not related to specific to the smart city or smart village concept. And when we tried to look at the preparedness of Azerbaijan toward the various indicators of the smart city, we looked at the data statistics of Azerbaijan and find out that looking from the ICT readiness indicators, Azerbaijan is not much ready for implementation of any type of the smart city concept, because if we compare it with Singapore or we compare it with other European countries where the smart city concept was implemented, Baku or Azerbaijan is far beyond or far behind of the ICT indicators. For example, fixed line subscription per 100 inhabitants, employment in the ICT sector, or average mobile internet download speed, broadband subscription, and so on and so forth. So it shows that in order to just move toward the smart city or smart village concept, the ICT readiness index must be much more bigger rather than what we have today in Azerbaijan, specifically related to the household with permanent internet connection and specifically broadband subscribers. So in urban areas, comparatively, internet subscription is okay, but in rural areas, there's a huge digital divide between rural areas and urban areas. The next thing that Baku, Azerbaijan is lacking, it's issue of the transportation or just a kind of unified system of the transportation. So in this case, what we have is that issues of accessibility, issues of the digital payment, safety, aging fleet, non-motorized transport in Azerbaijan. And the biggest challenge over here in the transportation sector, before just implementing the smart city, is absence of the governance approach. So let's put it like this way, there's several agencies in Azerbaijan and in Baku specifically dealing with the transportations of the passengers from point A to point B, versus there is no kind of a single unified approach to the transportation or decision making, because subway is completely different agency, bus transportation is different agency, railroad system is ruled by another type of the agencies. Another challenge for preparedness that we got from our interviews and from our data analysis is that biggest problem is the key market challenges. It's first of all, it's a poor access of the producers to finances, limited opportunities for raising funds. I mean, if somebody wants to do some kind of the smart agriculture, there's a limited applications of the best farming practices, poor market orientation, and definitely underdeveloped market infrastructure, especially taking into considerations online sales. Well, we can say that before the pandemic, the online sales in Azerbaijan was around 5% of all sales. So pandemic, whether we like it or not, somehow affected online sales, and now we can say that around between 50 to 20% of the sales is just to go for the online system, but still it's too limited for implementations of the smart cities concept. Another challenges in the system of Azerbaijan is the water system and water sector. It's because Azerbaijan is considered one of the water-stressed countries. So it's not enough in complete coverage. Around 70% of available surface water coming from the neighborhood countries in a heavily polluted state. So we're talking about Kura and Araz rivers that's coming to Azerbaijan from our neighbors. And what's really interesting that around 70 to 75% of the water in Azerbaijan is lost because most of it goes to the agriculture, and agriculture is usually using water system very extensively. So the concept of the smartness, it's very difficult to implement in the water sector. This is another challenge for Azerbaijan. Another thing is the waste sector. Just check how much time. Okay, I have 1 more minute. So waste sector is another challenge for Azerbaijan because beyond of Baku, there is no any other place that has a factory for recycling the garbage in the country. So there's several challenges. I would say also for energy, it's informational, technical, financial, and regulatory. The biggest challenge, from another perspective, is that there's no common approach to the urban strategy in the country. So the government has several documentation that somehow regulate the national urban strategy and smart city concept, but not necessarily one single approach to that system, and everything is just giving in the silos. So what can we just take from that our research is that smartness is more about applying the technology. We understood it as a more applying technology and data. That's how the government understand it. Citizen participation, unfortunately, there's not much about any kind of the involvement of the whether it's we got it from our focus groups from the community level, that not much the government does not use the IDP's opinions about how to implement the smart cities and smart villages in the country. Another thing is that access to technology and e-readiness, it's not there. And speaking about this smart cities and villages in Karabakh, the government already launched the first smart village in Karabakh that cost pretty much comparatively high numbers. So the question comes, will the government be able to continue to build the smart villages in Karabakh region, take into consideration the high cost of the building of such kind of the villages? That's pretty much it that I wanted just to cover. Thank you very much. We'll be looking forward for your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Valiyev. That was very, very interesting presentation, and I think the participants and we will have a lot of to ponder about this presentation. And also a slightly different topic, but also related with the economic geographies. As a geographer, I kind of try to frame everything in through this lens, so bear with me. And let me introduce our next presenter. Next presentation, that will be about pipeline geopolitics, cross-border energy pipelines in the South Caucasus, and the 3 countries' diplomatic positions towards Russia, 2003 and 2020. And our presenter will be Ruikai, who represents Jilin University and Hokkaido University. Ruikai, the floor is yours. You can share your screen and start the presentation. You'll have about 15 minutes for your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see the screen.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to attend this conference today. I'm from China, Jilin University. Today, I want to give a topic of my research. The title is Pipeline Geopolitics, Cross-Border Energy Pipelines in the South Caucasus and 3 countries' diplomatic position towards Russia. So, introduction. Following Georgia's Rose Revolution in 2003, the security environment in the South Caucasus has been characterized by the emergence of military conflict and a confrontational structure in the region, partially the Russian-Georgian War of 2008 and the Armenia-Azerbaijan military conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh 2016 and 2020. Therefore, the 3 countries of South Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, combined with own security environment, may form dynamic and diverse diplomatic position towards Russia on the issue of the cross-border energy pipelines, including pro-Russian, neutral, and anti-Russian. So my research question is that how does cross-border energy pipelines influence the 3 countries' diplomatic positions? So I constructed a theoretical framework. Cross-border energy pipelines reflect the geographic relations between the transit countries, suppliers, and consumers and energy, and can be regarded as a commander of the diplomatic position of the transit country. Since pipeline system is carried out in the territory of third country, and pipeline equipment may lead in one or even several countries other than the supplier country, the diplomatic stance of the transit country towards the supplier will affect the security and the smooth of the energy transport trade, including forwarding, neutrality, and confrontation. So the first kind is that the transit country for the pipeline transition initiated by another supply countries, such transit country has more independent diplomatic positions as intermediaries. They chart transit fees and transfer natural gas to the third country market. They can use transport nodes to carry out diplomatic contacts and hedging strategy on issues involving their own geopolitical interests, and bargain with suppliers and consumers on regional issues at the same time. This is first is intermediaries. The second type is that the transit country is served as the origin in energy supply countries are directed to supply energy to consumer countries. Such countries serve as the transition destinations without participating in the transfer of energy to third countries. Consumer countries depend on suppliers for energy and fearful of being cut off, prefer them in their diplomatic stance. The second is as a destination or as the end of the pipeline. The third, I think, is the most powerful. Since the transit country has a certain amount of hydrogen fossil fuel reserve, the transit may have a certain reserve gas transmission by relying on the pipeline connected to the supply country, which increases the diplomatic ability of the supply country. At the same time, transit country hope to build alternative energy pipelines, break the monopoly of supply countries on energy supply, implement pipeline diversification strategy, thereby passing supply countries and forming supply chain competition with supply country. So the transit country, the third type is that it has a certain energy reserve. So he wants to build his own energy pipelines to the third country and even reverse supply to the supplier. That's the 3 countries. I just give a summary. So the second is about security environment. Cross-border energy pipelines in the security environment, and Saakashvili's 2008 assault on Tbilisi, the capital of South Ossetia, promote a Russian military response. Russian forces extended the fighting to the capital, Tbilisi, blowing up a railway bridge in the city of Kaspi, west of Tbilisi, cutting it off from the Black Sea coast. In addition, the Turkish section of the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipelines and Baku-Tbilisi-Kars two east-west transit lines was hit by the Kurdish Workers' Party, PKK, which has close ties to Russia 10 days before the war broke out, showing the fragile position of the South Caucasus energy corridor. So I want to show us that the cross-border pipelines may be affected by the security environment, and the supply countries feel it is being competed. So it don't want to that energy cross energy pipelines to be constructed. Baku opts the passage of South Caucasus energy pipelines through Armenia, especially Azerbaijan fears that the alternative route through Nagorno-Karabakh would involve Russia in the construction project, weaken Azerbaijan and Georgia's quest for independent energy suppliers and transit position in the South Caucasus. So development and planning of north-south energy corridor between Russia and Iran, the new pipeline will carry energy from north to south through Armenia to Iran, relying on Russia's fuel, gas reserves and oil. It will not only balance the Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey east-west pipeline, but also enhance Armenia's position in the South Caucasus energy corridor, from Jilin, Yerevan, and Moscow transit access procedure. It is compared to the Tbilisi, Baku, and Jilin to form the two group of energy. That's I search on the such archives and for primary resource to give. So this is that on the South Caucasus energy pipelines. You can see that 2008 Russian-Georgian war has affected that region's energy pipelines. Also, the Nagorno-Karabakh is very close to the pipelines, so it may be affected the corridor. The Russians don't want this corridor to be built because it will harm to its own energy transit. So the next stage is how that the energy pipelines affected the diplomatic position of the three countries in South Caucasus towards Russia. I think the first country, Azerbaijan, is a neutral and balanced diplomatic position. Azerbaijan's development of oil and gas reserves along the Caspian Sea coast and the construction of alternative transport system to the Russian pipelines equals Europe's need to diversify energy supplies. So Azerbaijan has its own energy reserves, so it can play the role of the suppliers and to the Europe. So this is some data I made by myself. The data in the table is compared by the author, referred to the report issued by state oil company. You can see that, especially the Russia-Ukraine war, that Europe has demanded the Azerbaijan to export more oil and gas to it. So this is the first type. The Azerbaijan is neutral. The second, you can see that Baku also has its reverse supply. It can build the Baku and the Novorossiysk lines to use the Russians Novorossiysk to export energy to the Europe. So the second, Georgia, I think, is from anti-Russian to balanced neutral diplomatic stance. The 2008 Russian-Georgia war halted Georgia's efforts to build alternative energy pipelines in the South Caucasus. Moscow unilateral recognition of the independence of Azerbaijan and South Caucasus prepared Russia of two key points as the energy delivery plan and significantly hit Tbilisi oil and gas industry. So after the war, Georgia has felt that the delivery system anytime may be cut off by the Russia and isolated as a regional energy producer by Russian defense. So the Tbilisi gradually shifted from anti-Russian diplomatic to neutrality, returned to supply energy to Europe through the region's old pipelines. So this I summarize different pipelines in the South Caucasus and made a table such as Baku Tbilisi BTC, BTE, Baku Tbilisi BTE is a natural gas pipeline and oil pipeline, all included Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey. But Baku Subsa is Azerbaijan, Georgia. So Georgia is plays a very important role in the transit. But after 2008, his role has been hated by Russia, and Georgia has returned to the neutrality and to make the pipeline stable operation. So the final type, Armenia, I think is the most pro-Russian because Armenia has both joined the Eurasian Economic Union (EU) and the Collective Security Treaty Organization. As of 2012, Russia had invested more than 3 billion in Armenian energy projects, including the construction of energy pipeline from Russia's Caspian Sea coast to Armenia, giving Yerevan access to Russian gas at very low prices. So this, the second is about the two countries' total trade. You can see that the main part is the energy goods. 80% of energy used in Yerevan's national economy come from Moscow. I think that Armenia serves as the destination of the Russian supply, so it should depend on Russia. So it is pro-Russians. Armenia is the most pro-Russian in the South Caucasus, and the two sides can be seen as strategic allies. Armenia has joined both the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization (CSTO) and the EAEU. Russia is concerned about Armenia's diplomatic direction. In April 2013, the Kremlin played the energy card, raising the price of natural gas to Armenia by 50%. Russia used energy supply as a lever to the. Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay. Finally, conclusion. The cross-border pipeline in the South Caucasus bypassed Russia for independent energy transport not only became the eastward corridor connecting Europe and Asia, but also shaped the diplomatic position of Azerbaijan, Georgia towards Russia, and even rebuilt the national identity of two countries away from Russian domestic influence. So Armenia's asymmetric dependence on Russian natural gas and oil makes it impossible for Yerevan to completely break with Russian politically. Russia has deployed No 102 military base in Jumli, Armenia, to assist in protecting its border with Turkey and Iran. So that's my part. I hope to get your question and comment. Thank you very much.
Ruikai, thank you so much, and thanks so much for keeping up with the time. I really appreciate that. And I think we are moving to our last presenter today, Srbuhi Michikyan, whose presentation will be about precarious work and the production of social injustice in the retail and catering sector, an illustration of the Armenian retail and catering sector. Srbuhi will be representing. So she got a master's degree in research methodology from Yerevan State University, and also has spent time in at the University of Hradec Králové in Czech Republic, and she's now is a PhD student and pursuing her doctoral degree. The floor is yours. You have 15 minutes. We are looking forward to a presentation.
Thank you, Dato, and I'm very happy to see you all here again. So let me start. The food service sector is one of the most unstable and uncertain sectors that exist now, and especially after COVID-19, this sector and also restaurant sector, airlines, hotels, and construction sector showed their uncertainty the most. Also, there were some researches in Armenia, including one of my papers, showed that especially about food sector service, it is the same in Armenia. So we have very high level of uncertainty and instability in this sector. So in nowadays terms, there is this precariousness, or it's not showing. Precariousness or precarious employment, which is used to describe this kind of instability. And as you can see, we have 4 levels of description of instability according to this theory of precariousness, which is employment instability, instability of perspectives, income instability, and instability of working conditions. And for each you have some 4 or 3 descriptions of criteria for each, like regulation instability, possibility of job loss, position increase instability, income growth instability, your work quantity instability, and etc. However, especially in Armenia, there wasn't research that much that what are the conditions of possible distribution of resources and rights in this kind of sectors that have some precarious employment conditions. That's why I decided to also look at this sector of food service and catering to understand what are the possibilities of social injustice, reproduction, and I wanted to understand the possibility of resource and right distribution here, and the possibility to overcome this instability that the field is giving for specific specific social groups. And for my research, social justice was understood as a collection of these three indications. It's like it's equality of resources and rights, opportunity to gain more resources and rights, and participation in your work, especially for the decision-making processes that are important for your work. I did my research using grounded theory methodology. I did 18 in-depth interviews in Yerevan and Marsis for both with female and male participants, and from restaurants and supermarkets. They had different positions, like waiters, there were cooks, there were cleaning ladies, sometimes managers, and I tried to involve all of them, and I built the grounded theory to reveal the process of how this reproduction of inequality is going on within the precarious work. I revealed specific codes and specific indicators that are very important for this process, and I will just introduce you some of those, which are, for example, motivations to work in the sphere, personal economic preconditions, and personal social preconditions. These three main categories are the conditions before entering the field that are very important to understand how it will go on in the future. You can see here the gradations and subcodes for each of these big categories, like motivations to work. There are social and economic, personal economic preconditions can be like the share of income in family, additional income assistance, basic expenses, and personal social preconditions are the skills, family status, acquaintances, and response of the family or environment, like friends, to the fact that you are entering these kind of fields. The second big conditions are the working conditions that can be like individual working conditions after you're entering the field, the enabling or limiting perspectives that the work and the conditions of work can give you, and the general working conditions, alternatives to change your work or to change the sphere overall, and conditions for acquiring the perspectives, risk of losing the job, like your personal life, how it changes after you're entering the job, the work, and finally gained power in the workplace, which you can see is like work experience, environment, and your acquaintances with your managers or the heads of department. So all of these indicators were reviewed during my research, and they were very important to understand how the process is going and how the social groups have the opportunity to gain more resources, to gain more rights, and to be able to participate in decision making and control their working conditions. But in the end, as I continued my analysis, it turned out that there are four main conditions, four main indicators that work the most importance in this whole process, which is power gained in the workplace, alternatives, development of social basis, and development of economic basis. Let's go through each of those. So social base, the sector actually provides an opportunity to strengthen your social basis, but only if you already have some level of that, like a medium level of social basis or high level of social basis. And if you have that before you're entering the field, you are able to develop it more. And in the end, I will show how I understand what is low level of social basis, what is medium, and what is high level of social basis. The second is economic basis, and sector also provides you the opportunity to strengthen the economic basis. And in this case, it doesn't matter. Like even if you have low level of economic basis, this precarious work and food services will provide you the opportunity to increase your economic basis. What comes to alternatives? Alternatives are formed when you're depending on your peculiarities of socio-economic basis. So those who devote extra time in work and they acquiring new qualifications, they can have another workplace, and they can have other friends in other workplaces that gives them new alternatives to leave this job and go to other fields. And you can see from here that about the alternatives, alternatives can be gained only if you have at least medium social basis. So if you don't have some qualifications, if you don't have friends, if you, for example, don't know English, you're just a student, you won't have other alternatives than entering this precarious work. And the last thing is power gained in workplace, which can be gained in two ways. First, the positive attitude and acquaintance with your managers, which means that you are acquainted with your managers, you are friends with them, and you then start to gain power. The second is your individual input, the value you are giving to this workplace, which is done by qualifications, again, by your devotion, and it's also possible if you have some skills of management or language again. So according to all of these four criteria, I revealed 4 types of people who are working in these precarious work conditions. The first type is autonomy type. These are people, these have the pattern of characterizing individuals who have strong social bases and strong alternatives, but a lack of power in workplace. So they have lots of skills, they have like language skills, they have lots of money, but they don't have power in their workplace. What this means? This means they can leave their job, they can change their job to go to another company, which is also in food service and catering sector, but also they can leave the sector and go work in other places overall. Other is autonomous heteronomy. This pattern has like a weak or moderate economic base and also weak or moderate social basis, availability of alternatives and lack of power in workspace. They are dependent from workspace, so they can change their workspace, but they cannot change the working environment, and they cannot change the sector. For example, they can go from one restaurant to another restaurant because they have friends in other restaurants, but they are not yet able to change their sector, for example, from restaurant to go to work in an office or in an IT. They cannot yet. The third is heteronomous autonomy. These people have strong social base, weak economic base, but also can have medium economic base. They have alternatives, but the main thing here is the power that they have in workspace. So this heteronomous autonomy feels like these people are autonomous, but they are in reality heteronomous, because the power that they gain in working place makes them dependent on the specific workplace. So they cannot change their workplace because they already have an power here, and the power sticks them to this place. That's why they are not able to change it. And the last ones are heteronomy that have weak social conditions. They can have moderate economic conditions or weak economic conditions, but the main thing here is that they have weak social conditions and they don't have alternatives. They lack power in workspace, and they stick to both the sphere and to the workspace. Which means, out of my research, that the social preconditions are the most, the main thing that can decide, will you be able to change your position or to change your social group when you are entering to this field. And here you can see how I understand from my interviews if someone has weak, medium, or strong social conditions or economic conditions. I don't think I will have time to go to all of these, but you can see by yourself. If it is minus, then it doesn't matter for the if it is minus, then it means he or she don't have this criteria here. And if it's plus, it means that he or she will have. And if it is minus plus, it's usually doesn't matter. He can or cannot have it. And if we have time, I can just the outcome. I can show this, how people are entering. For example, there are two groups. First group is entering to the field because they have economic problems. The second one has social problems. Like for first part of the people, they enter the field because they need money. They don't have money. They don't have some friends here to find a good job for them. And the second group are people who don't need money. For example, they have parents who will help them. They are, for example, in Yerevan, they have homes, but they want some social changes. For example, they want friends, they want to be independent from their parents. And according to these two main reasons why they're entering to this field, they are divided to these four main categories that I already mentioned. And here you can see that, for example, autonomous people, they go out from the field. The heteronomy is confirmed in the field, and heteronomous autonomy also confirmed in the field, and autonomous heteronomy, they're adapting the field. So when they have this power, they are starting to work on the decision-making processes, and sometimes they can stick to the field, but they can make the all working conditions more stable, like to control their income, to control their schedule, and that kind of thing. So they're adapting the field, or then they're going out of the field if they can develop their social conditions. That's it. Thank you very much. I hope I am in time. Yes.
Thank you so much. Really, it was super interesting presentation and very, very relevant to our panel. And certainly, I think it's great to have like two presentations at our panel that looks at the issues of more precarious workers and more kind of precarious layers of the societies in South Caucasus, and giving the voice to these people, which unfortunately very often we are lacking of. I have a bad news and good news. The bad news is that lunch will be served in 45 minutes, but the good news, no? Yeah, something like that. But the good news is that we have more time for Q&A session. So let me let me open the discussion, and I guess we can just kind of ask one question, and I will let our panelists respond to the question, and yeah, we can take it from there. Yeah, please. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for very interesting presentations. My question is for Mr. Siu regarding geopolitics of pipelines in the region. I just wonder whether you had the opportunity or you are planning to analyze the data right after 2018, because your data was up to that date, because many things happened in the region. And the geopolitical shifts after 2018 changed the game, actually. And it would be very interesting to look at the data and to see how these shifts and changes happened after 2018 as well. Thank you.
Yes, Ruikai, please go ahead and respond to the question.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting questions. Yes, you are right. This is my preliminary study outcome. Maybe if you return to the history that 2008, Russia and Georgia have the war, and after that war, maybe the Georgia's domestic politics and the Russian domestic politics both has get a dramatic change, such as Russian has Medvedev has been after the 2012 election and Putin started his third term. I think it is very good point that I want to such as use that the data. I want to use the UN vote data, such as you may know that how that the UN vote that Georgia vote it is prefer Russians or anti or neutrality. I think it is more directly to show to that maybe after 2008 I want to use that data. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Next question, 1, 2.
I have a question for the colleagues who talked about the student housing in Tbilisi. I actually have 2 questions, so I will tell them both, and hopefully you can answer it. My first question is, in both of your opinions, what role could student associations play for students that come from regions to Tbilisi, both in terms of social capital as well as providing other opportunities to fully feel the belonging as a student here in Tbilisi? And the second question is, what would you recommend the universities in their responsibility of being engaged in their development as a student?
I'll take the first question. Actually, we had questions related to associations and students' movements in our focus group discussions and in-depth interviews as well. And the problem is that most of the students are not directly involved in students' associations and the work related works. There are 2 reasons. The official associations, which is into the universities, does not directly express their interests, I would say. They does not directly work on the issues, but there are independent protest movements and social movements who support adequate students' housing and all these kind of social problems. And in this regard, I would say that it is very important that the students will unite and have some kind of voice, united voice. And we had question why they are not involved in this kind of protest movements, and the main answer was that they do not have time. But in general, they support these movements and they share the values. So this is the main thing. So they need more communication and more engagement, I would say.
And I will try to answer the second question. During our expert interviews, we also investigated this issue, meaning what are the best practices of solving those issues and what type of resources do Georgian higher education institutions have. So basically both private, so we need to distinguish between private and state universities, how they can deal it and what type of resources they have. The currently is a lack of resources and lack of motivation. So private institutions don't have motivation to invest money in dormitories or student housing because it costs money and they don't have the return values. They don't see that it will be beneficial for them. State universities might have resources, but they don't have enough knowledge and enough institutional capacity to run it, because we interviewed the university in Kutaisi in Western Georgia that has the best campus in country now, but it's very niche and very small university. And the representative said that it's like running a hotel, and the dormitories and the student housing and public institutions, public higher institutions, higher education institutions don't have knowledge how to run it. And come across various bureaucratic obstacles. You need, just to give an example, when you want to buy something, you need to have a public tender, and you go through the huge process of bureaucratic pipeline of obstacles, and therefore they don't have motivation to do this. So it's additional burden for them. And as for suggestions, our expert interviews indicated that the alternative ways of education, meaning that distance learning or online learning, might a bit ease the burden that currently the capital city has, because everyone goes from regions to capital city to get the education. And me and Zakaria are also examples of that. So we are not from Tbilisi, and we came to Tbilisi universities in order to get the education. And in order to ease this burden, the technological developments might be applied, but this is also a very hypothetical suggestion, because you can't learn engineering or medicine through online lectures. So it's a bit a deadlock situation, what might be changed. Thanks.
So this is a question involving students in Georgia and precarious professions in Armenia. And I think this is actually one of these felicitous things where these two presentations go really, really well together. So this is my question for the three of you, is what overlaps do you all see in the issues that you're talking about? Obviously, one of them is the age demographic, right? But I think it goes a lot deeper than that.
So thank you for the question, because while my colleagues were presenting, I was thinking the same, that students actually are the main in these precarious conditions, students, and not only those, but youngs before 30 years are the main group that are involved in these precarious conditions. And not only our researches, but also the theory shows that this affects mostly the student and young population. And my research also was done, these 18 interviews were done with people who are from 18 to 35 years old. This is one thing that I saw similar for us, but also I think maybe my colleagues will say to add, in Armenia, it's also that women not married or divorced and not from the capital, like from other regions and villages, are also tend to be this precarious, in these precarious conditions a lot. I think this also should. What do you think?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I agree, but I don't have much information about the demographic and how these two databases overlap each other. But for me, the main thing was that both in Armenia and in Georgia they were youth, and another thing was that they have to work. Like it was not an option for them. And when they don't have option, they accept all the kind of low quality jobs. And in this regard, I think that they are very vulnerable. That maybe this word, I don't know how it fits, but exploitation. Like at some point, they are exploited by the employees, I would say. But in Georgian context, it was obvious in many cases. And another thing was that they have to work to cover the living expenses. It was the same in Armenia, and to pay for the education. So they are in this kind of situation. They are easy to hire in a very low quality salaries and things like that, work conditions.
And employees have a huge leverages on them. So if you don't like something, you can quit. And it's not that easy to quit when you need to pay for tuition and numerous expenses.
I have another question about the students here in Georgia. So you mentioned that, of course, Russians are one of the reasons why rent prices have gone up. To what extent do the students kind of attribute blame to Russians? And do you have a sense of like a rising frustration with the impact Russians are having on rent prices? Thank you.
Okay. Very interesting question. To be honest, I don't know much about it because we did not have direct questions related to this topic in the interview. But when I read all these transcripts, I have not noticed any blaming or any complaints about Russians. They knew that it was the reason, but they have not seen as a factor that they should be angry about Russians. Maybe that they were more angry about the public institutions and about universities, but never about the immigrants in Georgia.
And so, as I mentioned, it's a work in progress. We still need to conduct post-survey question or post-survey interviews, and we will try to investigate this issue in this case. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you to all presenters. Questions to Rati, Zakro, and Srbuhi about precarious conditions in both study and work. Now, these are very policy-relevant questions, and as much as I like numbers, I understand that in these situations, numbers really don't matter because even if one person is disadvantaged at work or at the university, the issue is there, it matters, it needs to be addressed, but we also know our conditions and our restrictions, both financial and mental, that policymakers won't be doing much unless you convince them that something is at scale. So do you plan anything to show your results in numbers? How much and how many disadvantaged people are there to make them, feel that they have to address the issue? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again. Actually, Rati and I were trying to calculate this kind of number. We have not finished this calculation right now, but in the final report, I hope that there will be exact quantitative figures. The problem about our quantitative survey is that it was an online survey and it has its own limitation, but roughly speaking, we were talking about the 30%, 35% of the regional students who are in really critical situation right now. And if I am correct, it should be only on bachelor's level, it should be around 15,000 students. Like it's a huge number. And yeah, I think that we need to emphasize and underline into the report this fact.
And just to add a couple words, so this study was a bit experiment for us too. So it was internal university small grant that was given to us, and this was what we managed to do. And personally, I'm not satisfied with the approach we had in a quantitative survey because it was a self-enrollment, non-probabilistic sampling, and therefore I would be a bit cautious when extrapolating our figures in terms that there are that X number of students disadvantaged. We can use this study more as a guiding study for to have a scale-up survey in terms to investigate deeply these conditions. But I won't be surprised if the figures will be more or less same. So we can still use this study. The key problem in this survey and in this study is that we are showing what are the problems, but it's very hard to show the solutions. So here we decided to have a shoes of academic researchers, not policy researchers, in terms of showing the gaps and problems. But partially that was covered in the expert interviews part, which we unfortunately could not fit into the time constraints. As I said, it's a bit a deadlock condition because no one has enough resources or motivation to seriously deal with this issue. And unless it's not a critical political issue for a government, they won't make concrete and specific steps to solve this problem. They might make a minor corrections, just temporary corrections, but fundamentally, unfortunately, things won't change and won't develop in a positive direction. Sorry for my pessimistic speech.
Thank you to the whole panel.
Sorry, I didn't. According to the quantitative analysis that you mentioned, this food catering and trade sector, actually before my research, some of my colleagues in Armenia already did this quantitative analysis in 2020 in Armenia, which is called Working Conditions of Employees in Field of Food Service and Trade in Armenia. And there is already published report about this. And I also took the data from there and did a secondary analysis on all the conditions of precariousness about the food catering and trade service. And this article is also already published, showing that yes, food trade and catering is precarious, because before that we didn't have this data, and I needed to analyze to understand if it is really in Armenia the same or not. So it's already published. About this second research, I am also planning to extend this research and to understand if these precarious conditions and this reproduction of injustice is the same in different fields in Armenia. So I'm thinking of spreading the research to different other sectors other than this food service and trade. Yeah, thank you. Sorry that I interrupted you.
That was my fault. So I also have a question about the student housing. From your expert interviews, did you get a sense that the universities are tracking like retention data, and is there any way of linking that to the conditions that these students face? For instance, and maybe in your data, you have a sense of how this is impacting like student outcomes in the classroom or their retention outcomes, like how many students are not completing their degrees, for instance, as a result of this.
Okay, from the third attempt. We asked this and we covered these questions in terms of how administration is dealing with this problem. So on paper, they are doing some job. It depends on the type of university, the type of management is in the university, and students also sometimes indicate that administration sometimes they are interested in it, but there is no systematic approach based on the data and based on the feedback we had. In the quantitative part, we are asking about how academic performance is influenced. So we asked a direct question about the GPAs they currently have and they expect, but we did not use this data because it was a bit inflated and very optimistic. So this question didn't work from our point, but from the qualitative part, everyone highlights that it has negative consequences, and the direct quotations we had during our presentations. So it influences mental and health well-being, and it has direct impact on the motivation and how they pursue their future academic careers. Our study did not specifically investigate the number of people, the number of dropouts, for instance, but there is official data that indicates that significant, I don't remember by heart the number, but significant portion of students either have terminated their student status or they are dropouts who could not continue studies. So we don't, so we can't now claim the causal link between these conditions and the number of dropouts, it will be extremely hard. But at least we could see a correlational relationship between the conditions and housing conditions and then being a dropout or terminating the student status. And we are concentrating on a specific type of students, but those problems might be in place of students from Tbilisi. We didn't investigate conditions of students in Tbilisi because you might be born in Tbilisi, have here housing, but that housing might be also depressing. So this is a bigger question that we did not investigate it specifically in our research project. Thank you. Thanks for this question.
I will add a little bit about dropout rates and the difference between the students from the region and from the capital. During the literature review, there was an article by Chang Seliani who directly wrote that there is the regional students are in a disadvantaged position because they cannot access higher education in Tbilisi. It was very expensive for them. But this article was written, if I am correct, in 2018. But after that, if we speculate about it, this number would be increased. This difference would be even higher. But our research really leaves behind those people who wanted to apply to universities in Tbilisi, but they did not because of the financial situations. So most disadvantaged group are those who did not become student at some point. We are not talking about the dropout rate. Thank you.
Any more questions? May I use my discretion as a moderator? So I think I have one question to Professor Valiyev. You mentioned that there is a differing understanding of what smart cities mean in a different government institutions in Azerbaijan. What's your take on why this is happening? Why is there like the different understanding of how smart cities should work? Why is not there like unified vision of this? Is that like the structural issue, or it's could be like even kind of a bigger question whether the concept of smart cities perhaps could be like somewhat superimposed?
Well, I think it's just, as you rightly mentioned, that the smart city concept in Azerbaijan was imposed by the upper level of the governance, and the mid-level of the bureaucracy didn't understand pretty much what it is. And depending on what kind of the problem that each ministry is facing, their understanding of the smart city is, or smart village, is completely different. For example, for agriculture, Minister of Agriculture, smart concept was more about smart agriculture. And they simply said that we cannot implement this project because that will be very expensive for us. For Minister of Transportation, it was more about the issue of how to diminish the traffic jams and just cost of the public transportation. For Minister of Energy, the smart means alternative energy, although this is not the case. And that's why whenever they say that smart concept, they're more talking about the alternative energy type of things. So I think it's a different understanding of the problem, superimposition of the concept of the smart city from above, and misunderstanding in the terminology from most of the government legislators, because they never dealt with this before. For some of them, it's a matter of efficiency. For others, it's effectiveness. But some others, it's a matter of equity. Thanks for the question.
Thanks so much. I think, I don't know, if there are no further questions, I guess we can just slowly wrap up this panel. I would like to thank all the presenters, all the panelists for taking the time, joining in person, joining over Zoom from different time zones, and please join me in kind of congratulation with this successful panel. So moving forward, I think we have a lunch break, and following that, I think